Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Chester Belloc Hour, brought to you by your affable hosts, Caleb and Connor. Sit back, relax, and join us for an enchanting journey through the wit and wisdom of Chesterton and Belloc. Stay tuned.
It freezes all across a soundless sky. The birds go home, the horrible dark's begun. The frozen dark that hopes not for a sun, the ultimate dark wherein our race shall die. Death with evil finger to its lip, leers at human windows, turning spy to learn the country where his rule shall lie. When he had ceased perpetual generalship, the undefeated enemy that still would shall be some, the voiceful earth at last. It masters of our moment and has bound the viewless wind itself. There is no sound. It freezes. Every friendly stream is fast. It freezes, and the graven twigs are still. Sonnet for January. Connor, we're back. It's been a while. We haven't recorded since Joseph Pierce. How you been?
I've been fantastic. How about you, man?
Been good. Now you can see in that sonnet, Belloc really was not a fan of January. He did not like the code, it seems.
As a South Floridian dealing with sub-60 temperatures right now, I could relate deeply to every word of that song.
100%. I was walking this week and it was like 35 degrees. I'm like, I should not be allowed to be outside. This is a cold day. Send me home.
I went to Trump's inauguration last weekend, and when I got home, it was like 50 degrees here. And people were criticizing me for this, but I swear it was colder than the inauguration, even though even though there it was 10 degrees. There's Florida cold is a different cold.
Oh yeah, and the humidity, the wind chill, it cuts right to your bone.
And on top of it, it's like it's not part of the deal. Like mentally, I was prepared when I was in DC. Here, I'm like, no. This was not my agreement.
You never have the right clothes. I had to bust out my box of Alaska clothes for work this week.
Yeah, I fully believe that.
It was ridiculous. Well, I was still cold.
I will say the other thing I like about that sonnet of the month you just read is just that I really like sonnets. As I've gotten more into poetry because of this show, you are quickly dispelled of the modern liberal notion that a poem is any set of words that means anything that encourages you to kill more babies. But in like a lot of poetry has an actual structure, and sonnets are the most specific. Sonnets have a very specific rhyme scheme, a very specific rhythm, a very specific. It has to be 14 lines. Yeah. It's those 3 stanzas of 4, and it ends with the two lines at the end. And there's a specific point in the 3rd stanza. You're supposed to have an actual turn where we get a shift into more positive light. Like sonnets have a very structured set of rules, and I love that. I really love that.
You've been reading some Plato recently, so I'm sure you've gone to the parts where Socrates always talks about an art or something to be perfected. Sonnets and poetry are just another art, and one of the big problems today is art has lost all means of objective meter, measurement. Even regular art is like there's no more. Like, I mean, this is going to be kind of a. No, I'll say it anyway. The reason Hitler was kicked out of art school is because he actually practiced art the old way, and they wanted new Van Gogh nonsense. Okay, he actually was a good artist. It was kicked out because he was too old school for the times. But that's just an example. I couldn't think of other examples. Of course, my brain's first example was Hitler.
How many paintings was he able to complete in that 4-year degree? I mean, if you could only make so many paintings per year.
I think got at least 6,000.
At least 6,000.
At least. Okay. Okay.
That's a strong first 4 minutes. We're back, baby. Welcome to 2025.
We're back. So this is going to be fun. I'm glad we're doing it again. I'm glad we're going to be hopefully doing these like at least once a month. We're going to get one of these out. And we got, opening sonnets for each of them episodes of this year. The ad break's going to be Belloc songs. I found a great one. Another great Belloc drinking song that will soon be turned into an AI video for the intro. For the ad break. It's going to be great. It's going to be a great year for the season.
100% agree.
Okay. Well, because I already went, do you want to go with your first poem?
I will. My poem, I have it this past week. Was the March for Life, and it was the Day of Prayer for the Unborn. So Chesterton has a poem called "The Babe Unborn," so that's the one I'm going with in the light of this week. So it's "The Babe Unborn. If all the sky were full of stars, and all the hills of grass, and all the roofs of chimney pots, how well the time would pass. If there were streets where folk went by, and fields where flowers grew, and roads ran up against the hill, I know what I shall do. I think that if they gave me leave within that world to stand, I would be good for all the day I spent in fairyland. They should not hear a word from me of selfish or scorn, if only I could find the way, if only I were born.
Damn.
Right?
Mm.
No, I had another one lined up, and then Chesterton Society emailed me that poem because I'm on their email list. And I was like, okay, well, there goes my old idea. That's what we're reading this weekend.
Wow, that is haunting. I mean, it reminds me to make a commonplace reference. Have you seen those pro-life memes where it's like it's a baby in heaven and it goes, that's a cute dog, mom. I wish I could have seen it. And supposing like a cat mom or a dog mom or something. Like it hits to the same level when you're just like, oh yeah, it hits right there.
I love him saying, I like it's the third stanza there. I think that if they gave me leave within the world to stand, I would be good for all the day I spent in fairyland. Because I mean that fairyland's been a common theme in this podcast and in all of Chesterton's writing. And I like the twist here. The fairyland isn't fairyland. It's us. It's getting to live here is living in fairyland. Which, to be fair, in addition to just hitting hard in this particular setting, is also very Tolkien-esque.
Yes. Wow. That's a great one. I'm gonna save that for later because that's gonna be that's going up on the Twiddle. Need to save that.
It's actually pretty short too. It probably. Do you have premium or whatever it's called?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say you probably do have to have premium to post it all because it's more than a few sentences, but it actually isn't that much of a read more.
Oh no, it's a pretty small, straightforward poem, but it's fantastic. I always forget with Chesterton when I have a habit of thinking of abortion as only like a now time thing, you know. Like every other issue we face is like the whole trans stuff is really bad today. It wasn't really a whole thing in the past. So I have a tendency to think of abortion in the same way. But then I have to remember, eugenics and other evils, it's been around for a while. Well, and they've been dealing with the ideas of stuff like this.
Yes, yeah, I would say yes, and abortion certainly hasn't existed as an evil the way it has today.
Yes.
For that long. But human sacrifice has been around since day one.
Yes.
But
I think it's good to remember.
Yeah, but there is something to be said that Chesterton would be bewildered. Whatever pain he felt writing this poem is nothing compared to if he walked the streets today and saw what happens now.
Saw the woman celebrating it.
Yeah, well, it was our good friend Jay who said during the elections that he wasn't concerned that Trump would lose, but if there were a reason to be concerned, it's because of how much women love to get abortions. And that's an insane sentence, but there is a specific type of abortion that is, or not type of abortion, type of woman that is solely driven by that. Yeah,
it's insane. I got into abortion at work actually this week. We were out in the field and there was a dumping pile where people had dumped all the trash and stuff, and several people had dumped dogs that were dead. So there were like whole dog carcasses and just dogs that were there. And I'm like, okay, it's a dead dog. It's a dog, sad, whatever, moving on. My coworker got so emotional and sad and threw off his entire vibe. And I kind of turned to him and went, you support abortion. You shouldn't be this upset about a dog.
Well, that was, I'll never forget. It was a few years ago. My little brother was in the Bahamas with some friends, and they were fishing because they were in the Bahamas. And this girl was a super liberal, was talking about abortion all week. I think it was like right after, it was either right after Trump got elected the first time or failed to get elected the second time, or right after Roe v. Wade got overturned. Like it was a liberal's 9/11, whatever, one of those days. And she was railing the whole trip about how like women's lives were now ruined forever. And my brother just shut up. He's not particularly political. He's not even like uniquely practicing Catholic. He'll go to like Christmas Mass with me. But he just shut up and he was like, whatever. We're going through this trip. I'm not gonna do this. Yeah, he didn't particularly care. And then they're sitting down at the end of the day. They'd gone fishing and they were eating the snapper that they caught. And she said she wouldn't eat it because it had a face. And he just looked up and he goes, "Are you kidding me?" Like that was his breaking point. He was like, "You won't eat an effing snapper?"
The vegan pro-abortion people drive me insane. I'm like, no, the only result is violence at this point. Okay, there's no other conversation to be had. So Chesterton criticizes these particular people because he has a poem. In fact, I'll probably pick it as my next poem, but it's called The Rational Vegetarian. And it's about a vegetarian who takes their beliefs to the logical conclusion. The problem is Chesterton is wrong. Chesterton is operating under the assumption that those are their beliefs. Their beliefs are that what is good, true, and beautiful must be destroyed. Yes.
And as a result, their beliefs are wholly coherent. It makes perfect sense to be a vegan and pro-choice because you hate humanity. Like, that's the goal.
Like, what's that? I can't remember his name, but a Mystery Grower on Twitter. He had a great tweet where he said, remember everyone, communism is when ugly freaks are jealous of you and want to destroy everything good. So yeah, true.
It's the ideology is just window dressing, is what he called it.
Yes.
No, yeah,
spot on.
It's 100%. All the other, I just went through and I'm making 3 piles of books because I'm moving this summer. And I'm just trying to get stuff organized. So I made 1 pile of books and they were keep. I made 1 pile of books and it was sell and or burn. My fiance won't let me burn them though, so just sell. And then 1 pile of burned. Well, she's a libertarian. She enjoys not burning books. But then a 3rd pile was just listed as David Brady, and they are just books that I'm ripping off to.
It's funny. I did the same thing when I was moving. I packed up my books into piles of give the church, keep, give the David.
Exactly. Who among us doesn't have a David pile in the corner of their room? But as I'm going through it, a lot of my books that were just from like my early 20s when I was like, I've got to read my enemies so I know what they think. And honestly, I kept some of those books because, quite frankly, like Vladimir Lenin's State and Revolution is awesome.
It is. It's a great book.
It's awesome. But I kept some of those books from that time. But there were other ones where I read and I was like, I said to my fiance, I was like, babe, we can't keep this book. It is just bad. And the people we're arguing with haven't read it either. Like they actually don't believe what's in the book. I wish we'd talked about this already because I would have used that quote. It is just, they're ugly freaks. This book is just window dressing. And there were some I kept for the sake of like knowing other things, whatever. But there were others where I was like, this book is just bad, and they also haven't read it.
Yes, yes. The only also liberals read nowadays are Yuval Noah Harari. It's like really the only mainstay like liberal intellectuals actually that read repeatedly. It's he wrote *Sapiens*. Did you ever hear of him?
Oh, I've heard of that. Yes.
Yeah.
I was about to criticize it and say I'm sure even he isn't read, but everyone and their dog recommends *Sapiens* because it's the new. This is the book you have to read because I'm a liberal and I told you so.
And what's really funny is I've read some of it. It's Chesterton would have the most fun of his life responding to it because it's all just like what's it? Everlasting Man when he opens up about the caveman and stuff and the cave drawings on the wall. It's just that his arguments of flipping all the evolutionary science or evolutionary biology stuff, is flipping them on their head. He would have a field day going through *Sapiens*. The entire thing, and every claim he makes, you can go, I can take the same evidence for the exact opposite claim. Your book is worthless. Yeah. It's worthless.
But the problem is nobody cares. Nobody cares at all.
No.
Yeah. Well, the reality of the matter is that's not true. The only book liberals read is not anything by by liberals I mean almost anyone in the modern world of any kind. Is the Harry Potter series, and then the thing that's slowly replacing the Harry Potter series for them, that one book that all women read, it's like A Court of Thorns and Roses or something, that series.
Game of Thrones?
No, not Game of Thrones. You don't know it. You're a man. Like, you've never heard of this book. I promise you. But all modern women are reading it now. And it's just read another book syndrome taking place. Yeah. And then
I wasn't read shitty fantasy or shitty fiction, then those self-help books.
Then porn, yeah.
Yes, it's three options for women reading today. It's either nonsense, self-help books, or smut. That's really the option for modern readers.
To be fair, I haven't read this book, and I've only seen women reading it, and like very modern women at that. Mm-hmm. So I have no evidence it's not smut.
Yeah. Very easily could be. Now I can't even go farther down that topic of women reading smut. That's a whole can of worms. Well,
really, it circles us back to the Babe Unborn, because if we didn't have a bunch of women just reading porn, we wouldn't have this abortion problem. But
absolutely.
Do we want to move on to your poem now?
Yes. So my poem will not be as serious. My poem is one of Belloc's more fun poems. It's called The Nordic Man. Behold, my sire, the Nordic man, and be as like him as you can. His legs are long, his mind is slow, his hair is lank and made of tow. And here we have the Alpine race. Oh, what a broad and foolish face. His skin of dirty yellow, he is a most unpleasant fellow. The most deranged of them all, Mediterranean we call. His hair is crisp and even curls, and he is saucy with the girls. The end.
That's so good.
It's such a fun little poem. The little dig at Mediterranean, the unpleasant yellow face of the Alpine race. It's fun. It's a nice little.
In our group chat with former Twitter user Integralist Revival, or whatever his name was on Twitter, I've been going back and forth criticizing the painting of Jesus at the National Shrine,
mm-hmm.
and he really likes it, and I really don't. And I think I didn't think of it until right now. Are you looking it up? I can just send it to you if you need to see it.
Please do.
But I think until right now I didn't have the words to describe what my issue with it is, and I think a large part of the issue is that in the cathedral, Jesus looks kind of like this Nordic man being described.
I'm looking at it now, and I'm not a fan.
I don't like it. No,
it reminds me of the Buddhist painting with some crisscross applesauce and the curve with the way he's wearing his robe.
The defense that our mutual friend gave is that it looks, he pictures it as what John would have seen in Revelation, which there's something to that argument. It does have that vibe. Ultimately, I think it's really weird to depict Jesus with blonde hair. I see that very rarely.
Yeah,
it's all the weirder.
It feels very Mormon-esque.
Well, and it's depicted as like, well, you know what's funny? I'll take it a step further though. I went with my fiance, who is a member of the LDS Church, and she immediately said, like, this is very weird. Jesus doesn't get depicted with blonde hair. So it's not that either. Like, it's just, it's a weird image. Yeah. He's got a unibrow that makes him look angry, but it's in the form of a unibrow. And his blonde hair is almost like braided. Like, he looks like a Nordic Viking, which I suppose there's a cool way to do that. But at the National Shrine, it's not. And I really do feel like I hear it. When I look at that picture, I hear, like, behold my child, the Nordic man, and be as like him as you can. His legs are long and his mind is slow. His hair is lank and made of tow. His skin is of a dirty yellow. He is a most unpleasant fellow. Like, I don't feel that about Christ, obviously, but that's what that is literally what that mural evokes in me.
So I just looked up several different famous Buddha paintings of Buddha. They all have the red robe, but with the draped over only one side.
Yeah.
So there is a very similar Buddhist-esque depiction there. That's weird. I can see an argument for it, but I'm not a fan. I would never hang it in my house.
I will say the argument my fiance made when we were talking about it for the explanation. Construction of the shrine, we looked into this. Construction of the shrine was begun in the 1920s, but then got interrupted by the World War and was finished in like the 50s and 60s, was what they said. It looks like some dude from the 60s made a mural. Is kind of the that's the ultimate explanation. Is like some modernist thought it was cool, and that's it.
Speaking of Catholic things that were put on hold because of World War II. When I was driving to Alaska, I went and met one of our online friends, Cass from Discord.
Of course I know him. He's a hero.
He's a great guy. I met him. And he was driving me around his town, taking me and pointing at different parishes and stuff. He pointed to a parish and said that tabernacle in there was ordered when the church was finished being built in 1920-something. But it was in Italy. No, it finished being built in like 1930s. But the tabernacle was in Italy, and they couldn't get to it after World War II started. They couldn't get it. So after years later, war was finally over to get it back in the 50s. It's full of bullet holes. It had been shot at.
That's
in a shipping container. Yeah,
that's
and they still
so
use
cool.
it. So they still use the tabernacle, and there's bullet holes in it. That's awesome.
No, that's freaking beautiful. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's awesome.
I want to visit Cass just to see that.
Yeah, dude, everyone should visit Cass. If you know Cass, you got to visit Cass.
Well, here's the thing. My reason to visit him is my in-laws all live in or my will-be in-laws. I suppose I shouldn't put the cart before the horse here. I don't get married till June. But my will-be in-laws all live in Kansas, and I'm not going to say too specifically where he lives, but like he's near there. The problem is, as a result, whenever I'm in that neck of the woods, as much as I love Cass, I've got priorities, and I end up going there. Then my little brother lives in northern Texas, so there's another set of priorities right there. So whenever I have an opportunity to get to that part of the country, I can't, I get drawn somewhere else.
Yeah. No, if you ever get a chance, Ben, we went to a bar, got a few drinks, just incredible time. He knows his town like the back of his hand, knows all the history. Just drove around and gave me local history lessons. It's incredible.
I was just thinking that you and I talk so often about like localism practice. Knowing that story of the tabernacle is the best thing you could do for your town. Like that's so great. He
embodied when we talk about local history and localism. He embodied it. Just driving around going, so I had a friend over there that happened, and over here she lives there, and he was here, and he just started rallying the entire town history as we drove. Incredible. Oh, before I forget, let's do wines. Are you drinking a wine today, Connor?
I am, in fact, without getting too specific as to why, this is my first glass of wine I've had since I sat down with Caleb. I've exclusively drank wine in 2025 with our friend Caleb here.
Well,
I'm having a Menage a Trois Midnight Dark Red blend.
Isn't that French for threesome?
It is French for threesome. I got it because it said dark red, and I was intrigued. I like darker things normally, so I went and gave it a try. I took my first sip, and I hated it. However, I think that's because 5 minutes before I started drinking this, I was eating buffalo chicken. I think since then, that taste is left, and it's actually, for a not too expensive wine, it's solid. Just don't eat buffalo wings with it. Yeah,
there's a reason why it's normally like a charcuterie board was wine, not spicy
not
wings. Well, I am drinking a Bartenuta, which is an Italian wine. It is a semi-sweet red, and it's not bad. I'm normally much more of a white wine kind of guy, but every once in a while I'll get a red, and it's pretty good.
I will say, while we're on wine, are we going to have the video, or is this going to be audio only?
Audio only, probably.
Okay, never mind. I was going to show my new pipe, but I won't bother since I won't go get it. I'll just give a quick shout out to the Catholic Pipe Company who just hooked me up with a new Pope Leo XIII pipe. I'll tweet it if anybody wants to see it.
Very cool. You've had speaking of pipes and tobacco, before we get into your essay, you've had quite a big. You appeared what on one podcast? Your book was referenced on another popular podcast. Why don't you kind of just
I've had a good
go into that
couple
for a
of
little
weeks.
bit.
I this January, if you want to look up the Pipe Cottage, Alan Harrelson of the Pipe Cottage did a brief episode on my book. It was very helpful for my book sales. It all but doubled them that day. So it was a wonderful day in my life. It funded a large part of my trip to the inauguration last week. But yeah, no, he did a quick thing on it. Those of you who aren't familiar, the Pipe Cottage, he's a very fine Southern gentleman with a wonderful Southern accent. He's been on Pints with Aquinas. He's spoken at the most recent Chesterton Society conference on tobacco and friendship. And I actually reference him in my book, Tobacco Theology. So he and I had been in talks for a while. I got him a copy of my book, and he decided to do an episode on it, which was awesome. He also posted a picture on Instagram just explaining it. I stole his picture because it's way prettier than any picture of my book I've ever taken. And then this past week, I went on the Scarlet Thread Society, which is run by Paz of Timeline Earth. It's like his offshoot within the Timeline Earth umbrella. Paz is not a Catholic. He is he's a Protestant, but he's one of the good ones. And he and I had a very good talk because he and I both have our almost primary issue within our respective churches being nicotine and tobacco. So we took some time and did like 45 minutes to an hour on his show. That came out just last week, so it should still just be in your podcatcher wherever you go. If you look up, I guess actually no, you have to go to their Patreon. But if you pull up Timeline Art's Patreon, it's right there. Yeah. It was really good. We particularly talked about my chapters in the book on Tolkien, American history, and the Jesus Prayer, The Way of the Pilgrim. How those connect to tobacco. Some are more clear than others, but you can go listen to the episode if you want to find out.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was a fantastic episode.
While I'm at it, I'm just going to chill. Go to my Twitter page. The link's in my bio, or go to Barnes & Noble and search Tobacco Theology. It'll come right up. It's the first result because I am a Barnes & Noble best-selling author. So it pops right up, and you can buy my book. Go do that.
Absolutely. Everyone should buy Connor's book. It's a really fun read. It's only, 2 or 3 cigars long?
That's exactly what I call it. 2 or 3 cigars long. It depends on the cigars, but 2 or 3 cigars long. It is not an academic read. It will not overwhelm you by any means. It's pretty short, very readable, very fun. A bunch of different defenses of tobacco.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic book. Well, we've covered the wine, we've covered your book, we've covered the poems. Let's get into the essay. What do you got for us today, Connor?
Oh yes. All right. On writing badly. Many people have suggested that every book ought to be reviewed as if it were published for the first time, even if it be Aesop's Fables or the Odyssey. In the first case, we ought to say, in the character of the wolf, Mr. Aesop has hardly broken fresh ground in moral psychology. Nevertheless, there is a certain quiet humor in this little work, which is refreshing in these complex and morbid days. Or in the case of the epic poem, we are to be imagined as saying, by this work, Mr. Homer has hardly added to his reputation. The success which attended his brisk and suggested Iliad should not have betrayed him into supposing that the public would endure from him the mere garrulity of a ballad mongerer. This idea is attractive, but after all, it is unfair. In order to judge a book fairly, we must not merely look at it as if we had never seen it. We must also look at it as if we had never seen any of its effects, of its branching influence, of its million imitators, of its eulogists, of its critics, of the eulogist of its eulogists, and the critics of its critics. As if we approach a masterpiece like Hamlet through the haze of an atmosphere which the masterpiece has itself created. We know that the thing is great before we begin to ask if it is good. There is something absurd in this very attempt to discuss how the thing should have been done, just as there is something absurd in the modern philosophical attempts to point out how the cosmos or the creation should have been conducted. How can we discuss how we should have written Shakespeare? Shakespeare has written us, and you, and I am sure you agree, are 2 of his best characters. In a very inferior degree, but still in the same significance, we may say that Alexander Dumas occupies this primary position from which he cannot be dislodged. He has many qualities in common with the classics, even with the classics who are much more important in literature than he. This certainly he has in common with the very great men, that he is indefensible. He sprawls at full length like Shakespeare and shows all his imbecilities. He is so open to attack that the word for him is not so much indefensible as defenseless, smilingly and superbly defenseless. He has the nakedness of the giants. He has that absolutely healthy characteristic of the really strong. I mean that his weakness is mere weakness and nothing else. His lapses are long, steady, healthy lapses, like great stretches of healthy slumber. The strong man's stupidity is as strong as sleep. It is not, like the stupidity of lesser minds, merely a nervous nap. The man who wrote The Three Musketeers must certainly have been a man of startling literary talent, and also of what the moderns call temperament, which means a power of seeing the world as the highly poetical thing it quite obviously is. Yet the same man could write, or as some say, cause to be written, hundreds of novels, of which Ascanio and The War of the Women are examples. Colossal and interminable volumes in which there is often no trace at all of that sudden and swaggering inspiration which sent out D'Artagnan, you can tell I haven't read these references, to fight three fire eaters who were all each other's seconds, or which carried off a great English soldier and politician inside a wooden box. Writing badly, anyone can understand who writes at all. I, for one, do it perpetually. Writing badly is the definition of journalism. Writing badly is almost in such cases the definition of living honestly. But writing badly on such an enormous scale, writing badly with such immense ambition of design, writing badly with such immense industry of words and pages, and writing so badly as Dumas did, these things are the marks of no common mind. It requires a great man to write so badly as that. It is as courageous as building an ugly cathedral and staring at it as it sits triumphantly in the sky. It is as bold as building the Great Wall of China and deliberately building it wrong. If Dumas was futile in his, it was almost in the same sense that Napoleon was futile. Good, bad, and indifferent, Dumas must be treated as a classic. Good, bad, and indifferent, he must be published entire by those who care for classic. This course has been most wisely adopted in regards to all the works of the great but uneven workers. Critics included among Shakespeare's works, almost reluctantly, such works as Troilus and Cressida, or Cymbeline, merely with the result that another generation of critics said they were the only good plays of Shakespeare. The old hearty admirers of Dickens were sorry that the uproarious master of the revels, who had made Pickwick, became at last so sad and faint and ineffectual as to descend to Little Dorrit. Whereupon Mr. George Gissing, a man of real literary inspiration, almost said he thought Little Dorrit was Dickens' best book. It is never safe to throw away the works of the best men as refuse. If you do, you will have all the best critics with their heads in the dustbin. Nevertheless, we may all quite fearlessly assert the badness of great masses of their work, so long as we do not propose thus coercively to carry it into effect. Shakespeare and Dickens resemble Dumas not only in the fact that their bad parts are very bad, but in the fact that their bad parts are very long. When they began talking nonsense, they went at it steadily, and there was no doubt about it. You could compile, I should think, the worst book in the world entirely out of selecting passages from the best writers in the world. Nothing shows more clearly the essential health of human democracy in the judging of such things than the fact that it is just this unpardonable prodigality and prolixity that is most easily pardoned. In the abstract, one would have thought that it was safer to write no book than to write a bad book. In the abstract, one would have thought that if the public had damned anybody, it would have been the man who went on writing books when they wanted him to leave off. But as a fact, the mass of men has done for its favorite authors, like Dumas, exactly what one would have thought would have been most tiresome and impossible. They have selected for themselves. They read the Three Musketeers with a just and honorable rapture. They read the memoirs of a physician with a definite pleasure. And they read Assanio without any apparent resentment. There it is.
I had to look up Alexander Dumas. I'm pretty sure that's Three Musketeers guy, but I had to look it up.
Yeah, I was finding out with you, if I'm being honest.
There were a few books he referenced in there, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know that also. There's a few authors he referenced. I'm like, I'm pretty sure I know their work. That's one thing about Chesterton is you can read him and get him, but also if you understand the history of when he's writing, or at least the culture of the time he's in, you're like, oh, this is way better because I understand the references. There's a lot of references.
I will say, the longer I read Chesterton, the more I get his references, and the better he gets. Yeah. Because you don't just need the culture of the time, you need the references to himself. Mm-hmm. Like, so are you familiar with his essay on chasing after your hat?
Yes, it's a fantastic essay.
Or on chasing after one's hat. So that for our listeners who don't know, it's a whole thing about how if you lose your hat in the wind, it's funny because it's undignified and you didn't want it to happen. So, but in reality, if you look at it through the lens of just optimism and joy, it's just as much a sport as any Olympic sport. He said we could line up and watch Olympians and the best athletes in the world run after a hat in the wind. And that's where his famous quote, an adventure is an inconvenience is an adventure wrongly considered. Mm-hmm. That's where that comes from, because he's saying the same about the chasing after your hat. So when I read Man Alive, which is one of his fiction novels, I had never read this particular essay about chasing after one's hat. Man Alive was still wonderful. Great book. Loved reading it. Now, every night or so, I'm reading a chapter of Man Alive to my fiance right now. And when Innocent Smith first gets to Beaconsfield or Beacon Hill or something like that. It's named after one of the cities Chesterton's from. But when he first gets to the setting of the book, the wind has caught his hat and he's chasing after his own hat and everyone's laughing about it. And all of a sudden I'm reading it, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't get this joke at all the first time. So I missed like an entire half of a chapter. Didn't make sense to me. And at the time I didn't care. I liked the book anyway. But that context continually improves the writing by far. Especially in his fiction, because as Joseph Pierce told us in our last episode, his fiction is very hurried and rushed and half-hearted. So when you're getting what he's going for, it makes it a lot better.
Yeah. Speaking of chasing after one's hat, you know that online where it's like you can quote tweet someone on Twitter and say, "Did you eat breakfast this morning?" You know? Yes. I've been trying to figure out how to do the when someone's being very like academic agent, for example, doesn't have any whimsy at all. Every time you post something, it's kind of like, anti-whimsical or just very basic. I want to just quote tweet and say he'd never take after his hat. We need to figure out a way to have a quick Twitter quote where it's just involving chasing after one's hat as a metric for being whimsical.
I bet you hate when your hat's lost in the wind. Yeah, something like that.
Something like that. And just to see.
Oh, that's great.
It'd be fun.
Well, it's fun. Can you imagine? I don't want to call out academic agent specifically because I don't really follow him, so I don't know anything about what he does. But like, could you imagine taking Twitter seriously? Like, I can't even imagine taking life seriously. So take Twitter. I'm like, that just sounds awful.
Yeah, that's the effect of Julius Evola.
Yeah. Whenever
I like academic agent, but
Twitter too seriously, I go to adoration because I've clearly forgotten what matters in the world if I'm taking Twitter seriously.
Yeah, like the Defend Academic Agent, he is a fantastic author. His book on Shakespeare that's really good. I've heard his book on A Prophet of Doom was fantastic. What's it called? Populist Delusion. Like, he's a really good author, and his commentary is great. But every once in a while, he tweets things, and I'm like, you are so old. Shut up. Like, he went on a whole tweet thread a while back, a whole complaint about self-checkout lines. And I simply commented, sounds like an old man complaint. I have zero problem. He quote tweeted me and said, but you never had to buy groceries for a family before. You probably still live with your parents. I'm like, whoa.
Okay, hold on. I'm going to make a point and then I'm going to argue with myself. Because I have 2 points and they're directly contradictory. One, I actually have an article in one of our Chester Belloc things called "The Need for Whimsy in Distributism," and it's that if things aren't whimsical, it doesn't matter if you have good thoughts. No one cares if it's not fun. You have to be having fun. Yes. 2, I don't know his stance on self-checkout lines, so maybe I don't agree with him, but I think I agree with him. I, too, am infuriated by self-checkout lines.
I don't... Objectively, my position is we shouldn't have them. They're bad. We should have more human interaction. That's good.
Yes, okay.
However, I can operate one, no problem. Okay. And so my complaint was he couldn't operate it. It's like, it's not that complicated.
Then I agree with you. I will constantly drag my fiance to a longer line at a store so that we can talk to a woman at the end of her 12-hour shift. Like,
yes.
I think self-checkout lines make us a worse civilization demonstrably. But I can, in fact, operate a self-checkout line.
Well, you say the worst for civilization, but we talked about the whole competency crisis earlier when you're trying to pick up food. Imagine if it was self-checkout.
Yes.
Like maybe the competency crisis will get so bad we'll be wanting to Tesla robots.
Okay, but for what it's worth, I had to wait an extra half an hour for a cheesesteak today. But at least I spoke to human. Like, I would rather be mad at a person than be happy with a machine.
It's a good quote. No, that is a good essay. I did enjoy that.
Yeah, well, as someone who writes badly very regularly, I'm quite fond of that essay. I like Chesterton's quote. I like Chesterton's quote in it where he says, what was it? I already put it here. It is. But he says, writing badly, anyone can understand who writes at all. I, for one, do it perpetually. I love that line. I mean, most of my writing for Chester Belloc Hour is something I wrote in one sitting because I had a thought and then I send it off with no more thought. And then even my book, which I've got right here, best-selling author on Barnes & Noble. But even my book, like, I didn't have my book edited because at the end of the day, there are parts of it where it's noticeable that I didn't have my book edited, but I didn't intend for my book to be like an intellectual powerhouse. I intended it to be my thoughts on the back porch with the cigar. So I'm quite fond of writing badly.
Yeah. As someone who also writes so badly he doesn't post anything, I can relate. I mean, that's a good one, though. That was fun. Okay, before we wrap up, I do want to promote something, not mine, but I'm going to promote something of Belloc that I want to be talking about. If you are listening and who have kids or going to have kids or want to have kids, I'm going to recommend you guys pick up the More Alphabet from Hilaire Belloc. It's similar to his cautionary tales for children with the little poems, but instead of being like Matilda, who told lies and burned to death, it's like, I'll read one real quick. A stands for Archibald, who told no lies and got this lovely volume for a prize. The upper school had combed and oiled his hair, and all the parents of the boys were there. And words that rang like thunder through the hall drew tears from some and loud applause from all. The pedagogy and the pardonable joy bestows the gifts upon the radiant boy. Except the noblest works produced as yet, says he, upon the English alphabet. Next term I shall examine you, to find if you have read it thoroughly. So mind, and why the boys and parents cheered so loud that the doors, a large and anxious crowd had gathered, and was blocking up the street. The admiral outside resumed his seat. More, learn from the justly irritating use to brush your hair and tell the truth. Like the simple little alphabetized poems, a little more in them. You know, the fun, the great, the simple.
I will say, those who don't have video, I guess we're doing audio only, so they can't see that I didn't get up. I did not have to move to grab this. I had Cautionary Tales within reach, the thing you referenced. I won't read one more for another day. It's so good.
Oh,
Chesterton's children, or not Chesterton, Belloc's children poetry is so good.
Oh, absolutely. It's fantastic. Every few months I end up re-listening to Joseph Pierce's book, Old Sunday on Belloc. And it is like he was known for being a poet. Like that was his main call to fame in his lifetime, was being a poet. And now it's the thing we talk about the least in reference to him is his poetry.
Yeah. Well, and it's funny. I mean, you look at the four men, which, not to say that the four men literally were Belloc, because that's quick, but the four men literally were Belloc.
Yes.
And you look at it, it's Grizzlebeard, the sailor, myself, and the poet. It's not Grizzlebeard, the sailor, myself, and the essayist or the journalist or it's the poet, because when he broke himself into four personalities, the poet was 25% of him.
Yes. So anyone listening, also I think it's the more alphabet, things like $8. It is not expensive. It's fun. But yeah, so I think that covers the essays and the poems. Connor, any final thoughts or plugs before we get out of here?
Yeah, one last shill, Barnes & Noble, Tobacco Theology, or at my Twitter, Natural Authority with no Y, so just Natural Authority. The link's in my bio. Go buy my book, Tobacco Theology. Barnes & Noble bestseller.
Fantastic. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Check out the Substack for essays and poems. Prayers. We almost forgot to do prayers.
Oh, yes. I even got mine off my fridge. I've got it right here.
Okay, I got mine up as well. So you go first, and I'll end with the photo and scene one.
In nomine Patri et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. God our Father, you filled the life of your servant Gilbert Keith Chesterton with a sense of wonder and joy, and gave him a faith which was the foundation of his ceaseless work, a charity toward all men, particularly his opponents, and a hope which sprang from his lifelong gratitude for the gift of human life. May his innocence and his laughter, his constancy in fighting for the Christian faith in a world losing belief, his lifelong devotion to the Blessed Virgin Mary, and his love for all men, especially for the poor, bring cheerfulness to those in despair, conviction and warmth to lukewarm believers, and the knowledge of God to those without faith. We beg you to grant the favors we ask through his intercession, so that his holiness may be recognized by all, and the church may proclaim him blessed. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Heavenly Father, source of our holiness, you raised up in the church in every age men and women who serve with heroic love and dedication. You have blessed your church through the life and ministry of your faithful servant, Archbishop Fulton J. He has written and spoken well of your divine Son, Jesus Christ, and was a true instrument of the Holy Spirit in touching the hearts of countless people. If it be according to your will, for the honor and glory of the most holy Trinity, and the salvation of souls, we ask you to move the church to proclaim him a saint. We ask this prayer through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay, well, that wraps up the episode. We'll be back next month with more poems and more essays. Until then, everyone have a good night. God bless.
Our hour together has drawn to a close. We hope the Chester Belloc Hour has left you with thoughts to ponder and a heart a little lighter. Thanks for listening. Until next time, we wish you a restful night and a bright tomorrow. Good night.